On this first Sunday of Advent season, heading into Christmas time, we wanted to look at the person of John the Baptist. Now, you heard some of the readings about him in the Advent reading, but he's a really key figure, and he's a person that most of us in here will know about, but tends to be a person that we overlook. And we're going to make sure that we spend some time really looking hard at John the Baptist today. But I'm curious, let's just kind of get some of the facts of John the Baptist out there. So go ahead and just kind of start firing off. What are some of the things that you know or that we know about John the Baptist?
He ate locusts and honey.
Okay, he ate locusts and wild honey. He lived out in the desert, and that's what he ate. That's what people that live in the desert eat. Yep. He is Elizabeth's son. And who is Elizabeth related to besides her husband? Mary. They are first cousins, which makes John and Jesus second cousins. Okay? It's kind of a key fact. What else? Okay, yeah, when John was in the womb and Jesus was in the womb, John the Baptist, by the way, is 6 months older than Jesus, okay? And so when Mary shows up to visit Elizabeth, John leaps in Elizabeth's womb, and Elizabeth then begins to prophesy, wow, I'm in the presence of my Lord. She realizes by that action, the Spirit of God comes on her, and she realizes what is taking place inside of Mary. Okay? It's pretty neat. Anything else? He didn't feel worthy to baptize Jesus. He was the Baptist, after all, which means he was the one baptizing, and he baptized Jesus, but like she said, he really didn't feel worthy. In fact, he goes on to say, I'm not even worthy to hold on to his shoes. Okay, yep. He was beheaded. Yes, the lovely part of his story, absolutely. He got caught up in the scandal that was taking place between Herod and Herod's brother's wife, and they were together when they shouldn't have been. And John called them out on it, and he called them out on it so often that they got sick of hearing it, threw him in prison. And then there was that interesting evening where Herodias is the woman we're talking about, sent her daughter out to dance before King Herod and his crowd. And he said, I'll give you anything you want, up to half the kingdom. She said, I want John the Baptist's head on a platter. And it was done just as she asked. So, interesting story. Another interesting fact about John. Anything else?
Sent the two to ask Jesus if he was the one.
Okay, very good. In fact, since you said that, that's where our passage is, and that's going to be Matthew chapter 11. If you'll join me in Matthew chapter 11, we're going to dig into this particular part that Scott just mentioned. Gospel of Matthew, chapter 11. We'll start the reading right at verse 1. After Jesus had finished instructing his 12 disciples, he went on from there to teach and preach in the towns of Galilee. When John heard in prison, so obviously this is prior to the beheading, when John heard in prison what Christ was doing, he sent his disciples to ask him, are you the one who was to come, or should we expect someone else? Now let's pause there for a second. The word that is used for the two words here, someone else, is heteros, and it actually is better expressed by our word another. So you may have a translation or a version that says the word another. So here's how it really should read. Are you the one who was to come, or should we expect another? Now, that may not seem like a very big difference, but it is, and I'll explain that to you in a minute. So we're just going to hang on to that, and we'll come back to it. Jesus replied, go back and report to John what you hear and see. The blind receive sight, the lame walk, those who have leprosy are cured, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the good news is preached to the poor. Blessed is the man who does not fall away on account of me. So, John's disciples were leaving, carrying that message back to John, and Jesus turns and began to speak to the crowd about John. Listen to what Jesus has to say about John. What did you go out into the desert to see? A reed swayed by the wind? If not, what did you go out to see? Did you go out to see a man dressed in fine clothes? No. Those who wear fine clothes are in kings' palaces. Then what did you go out to see? A prophet? Yes. I tell you, and more than a prophet, this is the one about whom it is written, I will send my messenger ahead of you, who will prepare your way before you. I tell you the truth. Listen to this, what he says about John right here. I tell you the truth. Among those born of women, there has not risen anyone greater than John the Baptist. This is the God of all the universe making this statement. Must be pretty significant. Among those born of women, there has not risen anyone greater than John the Baptist, yet he who is least in the kingdom of heaven is greater than he. From the days of John the Baptist until now, the kingdom of heaven has been forcefully advancing, and forceful men lay hold of it. For all the prophets and the law prophesied until John, and if you are willing to accept it, he is the Elijah who was to come. He who has ears, let him hear. To what can I compare this generation? Or to what can I compare this crowd of people that are listening to me right now, this generation alive over 2,000 years ago? They are like children sitting in the marketplaces and calling out to others. We played the flute for you and you did not dance. We sang a dirge and you did not mourn. And now he addresses some of the accusations or some of the things being said about him and about John. Here's what he says. For John came neither eating nor drinking, and they say he has a demon. The Son of Man, me, Jesus, came eating and drinking, and they say, well, here is a glutton and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners. But wisdom is proved right by her actions. Now, there's quite a lot that Jesus has to say about this person of John. In fact, he elevates John to a level unlike any other, does he not? Of all that have been born of a woman, none is greater than this John, the one who was baptizing. So what is it about this John that we tend to overlook? We kind of pass right by him because his story is outweighed by Jesus' story, and it should be. But let's not overlook who this person is and the things that he said, the things that he was doing. So I want us to turn back to Matthew chapter 3, and let's just see what this person John was doing and saying, that Jesus would go on to make such a statement about him. Matthew chapter 3, and we'll come back to 11 in a minute. In those days, so now we're talking about right before the beginning of Jesus' ministry. In those days, John the Baptist came, preaching in the desert of Judea and saying, repent, for the kingdom of heaven is near. This is he who was spoken of through the prophet Isaiah, a voice of one calling in the desert, prepare the way for the Lord, make straight paths for him. So we see John is beginning to fulfill prophecy that had been spoken of. And understand that in this day and age, they knew what the prophecies were, and they were looking for him. They knew that the time was right for Messiah to show up. There had been enough evidence, especially in Daniel, with the timeline for them to know that they were living in the day and age when Messiah was going to show up. So their eyes and their ears were peaked, were open, and they were looking for Messiah.